My name is Luisa Oliveira, and I am the Director of Public Space and Urban Forestry, which is a brand new department in the city. And I want to welcome you all tonight, and also to acknowledge City Councillor Bill White, City Councillor Mary Jo Rossetti. They're here, they're in the back. And to welcome you on behalf of the mayor and the sponsors of this event, City Councillor Matthew McLaughlin, who should be joining us shortly, as well as our state representative Mike Conley and Senator Pat Jalen. Both Mike Conley and Pat Jalen were at the first meeting that we had, and they are the same meeting. We are just trying as much as possible to get as much feedback as we can. And both for that meeting and in this meeting, we have the language liaisons here, so we're trying to get we're in recognition of the fact that many times we see the same faces at public meetings, and we really want to try to get some of the folks who don't typically come to public meetings or may not feel as comfortable in public meetings to come. So we will be having a table in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Haitian Creole, and in English if there are folks that show up that would like to speak those languages. If not, we will probably just do the whole thing in English as we did in the first one. We have a number of staff members who speak different languages, and we will introduce ourselves in just a second. So again, my name is Luisa, and eu falo português. So if anybody wants to speak Portuguese, I've got you. And we'll be talking about the rest of the staff members and their languages as well. So welcome. Just a couple of logistics. So we're going to be splitting up in the 4 teams as we need. There's pizza in the back. Please help yourself. There are no drinks, but there's a water fountain just out the door this way, as well as restrooms. Are you advancing for me? Okay, great. So I've already introduced myself. I'd also like to introduce Brad Rawson. He's in the hallway opening the door. He is the director of the mobility team, and he will also be participating. He'll be coming in. Irma Flores, she's right here, and she's the language liaison who will be speaking in Spanish. Adriana Fernandez is just there. She will be speaking in Portuguese. And Jenny Saint Surin is right there, and she will be speaking in Haitian Creole. So in as much as possible, if you need help, if there's anybody who needs help with translating in this beginning introduction part, just raise your hand, please, and we'll be happy to help with that. Okay, the goal of this meeting is, as you know, Foss Park belongs to the DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is a state agency. And the city is often trying to advocate for getting more control of the park and for making the park better. So the goal is to help that advocacy, is to try to understand what the community needs are of the park. And I know there have been other meetings that were similar to this one, where people were asked about the kinds of changes that needed to happen in Foss Park. But our goal is really to gather as much feedback as possible, which we will then compile into a report that can be used both by our public officials to help advocate for, and for us to know what the community needs are when those opportunities arise. Just to give you a quick history of Foss Park, this is actually, I thought, very interesting. So can everybody see I will read all of these, so you don't have to read the small text, but can everyone see at least the photos? Okay, so there used to be a canal that ran through Middlesex Park, through Foss Park, called the Middlesex Canal, and it was an industrial low-lying area of the city. By 1875, they decided to fill in this low area at a whopping cost of $26,000 and change for this project. And they used land from Convent Hill, which was one of the hills. There was a lot of earth moving in the 1800s. They had held a design competition. It was won by the city's first engineer. His name was Charles Elliott. If any of you are landscape architecture buffs, it's not that Charles Elliott, but rather a city engineer who had the same name. He also designed Prospect Hill Park, the Overlook and Tower Park. And in 1876, the park was completed and named Broadway Park. By 1921, it was renamed after there was a city poet laureate whose son lost his life in the First World War, and they renamed the park Saxon Conant Foss, which still is the name. And in 1951, the Metropolitan District took over ownership and maintenance of the park and added a public swimming pool and the bathhouse in 1954. MDC also added the fields and the playgrounds in response to a shift in uses. And in 2003, MDC became what is presently the DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. So let's just look at some quick photos of that because it's quite interesting. Here's the original landscape design. You can see there's a series of, excuse me, of meandering pathways and a large central pond in the middle. This is 1872. This photo is around 1905. You can see people skating on that pond area. Again, in 1905, when it's not covered in ice, you can kind of see what it looked like. And this is a postcard. What's interesting about this postcard, it actually says looking across the pond, and some of these buildings are still there if you live on that side or can locate yourself by some of those buildings. Again, a 1905, and you can see there's these two structures here, which are some kind of, I'm guessing either some kind of bathhouse or restroom area. And by 1911, they kind of, it seems that they've added some curvilinear edging along the pond. And then, if any of you have lived in Somerville for a very long time, your grandparents might be in this photograph from 1941, or you too, I suppose, could be in this photograph. And this is the fountain in the center of the pond. All the kids are piled up on it. And I think we have a couple more historic photos. This is in 1949 when they had drained the pond. So the previous photo was the kids on this. And you can see, it's funny that they call it a pond because it doesn't seem to be all that deep, really, although that photo may be a little misleading. And then in 1950, this is the last photo that we have of folks swimming in the pond. Again, I don't know, maybe some of you are recognizing your ancestors in these photographs, or yourself, I don't know. So this is 2019 and what it looks like. This is a drone photo. You can see the new splash pad, which was completed about 2 years ago, and then the pool is just behind that tree. And an aerial photograph where you can see what the pond is used for, what the park is used for today with the swimming pool. And this photo is a little bit older. Now that splash pad is no longer, and there's a splash pad on this side. And there's a playground area here, the rectilinear field here, baseball diamonds, a basketball court, and tennis courts. Foss Park is our largest park, second largest park. Alewife Brook Parkway is larger, with 13.62 acres, so it's quite substantial. And one of the reasons why we have the athletic fields there is because it is in fact large enough to have athletic fields. As I mentioned, it's owned by the DCR. It's a 5-minute walk, so that's a quarter of a mile walk from a number of other parks with a number of different other amenities. And because of its size, it does have some unique features, including the pool and the splash pad and the athletic fields, which again require large spaces. Okay, so originally we had this 4 groups in 4 languages. I'm not sure that, are there other folks who would like to speak other languages other than English? Okay, so I think we're going to have to work with the language liaisons to try to focus on other language groups and try to get their feedback, because that is very important in this park. But for now, I think we'll revert to Plan A, which is that we will go through each. There are 4 subject areas, and we want to introduce you to each of them, and then the staff team will come up and speak to you about the different subject areas. So the first one we're going to talk about, there are 4: athletic fields and courts, playgrounds and pools, climate and the natural environment, and access and safety. And these are not exclusive of anything else. We want to hear all of your comments, but and we will stay to do so, but this is the way that we could kind of try to organize the conversation. So the first one is athletic fields and courts. As you know, there are two tennis courts and a basketball court there, and I think they're pretty widely used. I think there are not a lot of opportunities for tennis courts in Somerville, so they are booked through DCR. There's the rectangular court, which, as you know, is very heavily used for soccer. Also, all of these are booked through the DCR permitting system. And the extensive lawns, some of them, as you can tell, this is the athletic field that we just looked at. This is what the condition of the lawn is. You can see the little pock marks from the cleats, but it really is a dust bowl. And if you go by on a dry day, you can see that it's very dusty. Arn reports that we've been joined by Senator Jalen, welcome, and Councillor Matt McLaughlin. So welcome to you both. Just go back one more, Eric. In the other areas where the lawn is, you can see that it's partially lawn, partially not so lawn. So there's a lot of issues with the playing surfaces. Some of them have to do with the use, and some of them with just not the kind of maintenance that they potentially are getting or not getting. A couple of weeks ago, you have all probably seen these signs that say a new playing field is coming, and DCR has committed to doing that. It originally said coming soon, and then I think it said opening fall of 2019, but there is a new sticker on there that says summer 2020. So in fact, that is our update on those fields, that they will be opening next summer. DCR has decided to invest in these fields. It will be a synthetic turf field because of the amount of play and how much permitting they do, and also in recognition that we, in Somerville, also have a lack of athletic fields. And then some of the diamonds, these are conditions. In these, when they're not being used as diamonds, you can see there's folks walking their dogs or using them for other things. The playgrounds and the pool, the new splash pad was added. It's very popular. This is a regional facility, so many people come from far away to use the pool and the splash pad in summer. And then there are two playgrounds that are bisected by a pathway, one for smaller children, probably in age 5 to 12, or larger children from 5 to 12 and from 0 to 5. And that's the other one with the baby swings. And again, the playground structure. And there are a number of different amenities, from seating areas, trash barrels, all with different levels of different condition levels. The second subject area that we'll talk about is climate and the natural environment. And just to give you a quick overview, and then as we break up, we'll talk a little bit more about it. So Foss Park has some beautiful mature trees. Certainly there's some very picturesque photos that can be taken here. There are 113 trees at Foss Park. We know this from our city inventory of the trees, and Dr. Bukili, who's our city arborist, will be talking about this. There are about 31 trees in good condition and 64 of them in fair condition, with 16 being rated in poor and 2 dead trees. There are 19 ash trees at Foss Park, and this is important because, as many of you know, there's a little pest called the emerald ash borer, which has arrived in Somerville, unfortunately, and that DCR and the city both are treating the ash trees to prevent ash borer, but it is a biannual treatment. So every other year they have to be treated to kind of keep the pest away, and the pest is here. So it's important for us to be thinking about what that's going to mean for the future of our ash tree population. In terms of flooding, this map is 2070, I think. Where's Courtney? 2070. So projections, if we did nothing, what this area would look like in 2070 for climate change, and you can see it's underwater. So there's some water becomes waterfront property pretty quickly. And we will be talking about these in the groups, so we're just giving you a quick overview. The third group that we'll be talking about will be led by Brad Rawson, the Director of Mobility, and we'll be talking about access and safety to this park. Foss is a great park, but it is really three sides of enormous highways and hard to get to. From three sides, you have to cross substantial highways. There's also the path that runs along it and how safe you feel with a 3-lane highway, just 4 feet separating you from that. So this is a picture of those highways and of the entrances. The park is closed from 10 p.m. to dawn. We don't know how much it actually is closed, if there are things going on there. This is all stuff we want to hear from you. Again, the highway, the difficulty of getting across to get to the park. This is a shot from Broadway. And another one going into the intersection of Broadway and McGrath, which is a very heavily trafficked area. So just to recap again, the goal is to gather feedback from you, the users of the park, to understand the needs and the opportunities and the constraints. And then this will be pulled together in a report with the first meeting and with other, as I mentioned, strategies that we'll be working with the language liaisons and surveys on site. And we'll talk a little bit more about other ways to give feedback in a second. Okay, so at this point, we are going to have the first group, Environment and Climate, is going to talk about some of the issues and try to get feedback from you, and then we'll have somebody writing down the things that you are saying. So I want to introduce Dr. Vanessa Bukili, who is our urban forester, senior urban forester. She hablas español, so if you have things to tell her. And also Courtney Kirk, who is the public space and streetscape planner, and they're going to be talking about climate and natural environment. So let me just move this.
So hopefully we'll speak loud enough. Sorry, we're having some microphone issues. This one's just for the camera. So can everyone in the back hear me okay? You're not nodding, so maybe I'll speak a little louder. So we definitely want to hear your feedback, primarily before we get into what we think might be real important. So how many of you that use Foss Park think the natural environment of Foss Park, the trees, the plants, are important? Okay, good number. All right, so are there any specific things that you like about the natural environment at Foss Park, or that you wish you could see there in the future? We'll just open it up. So anyone have any suggestions? Jerry, go for it.
Well, with the presentation, talking about what we did with trees and what trees are doing well. I don't know the update on that as far as there's going to be some land.
Sorry. The mics don't work, so this is just for the video. Can you? Oh, should we do this? Okay, we're gonna transfer this to you to speak so that the video, so people can hear your question in the future on the video.
Okay, I'll take a ham with I'll take eggs with that ham. No, yeah, so I'm looking at there's going to be some landscaping done, correct? I'm not sure if it's state, federal, city, but we have a lot of amenities in the city, and what I was looking at was to add in the urban environment. When I started involved with this years ago, we just got like pigeons, sparrows, and starlings. Now I'm seeing a large variety: chickadees, cardinals, goldfinches. So we know that planting trees, shrubs, vines, ground covers attract nature, but of those plants, some of them attract a lot more, like junipers, hollies, on and on. Is that a possibility without being intrusive to the other activities that are going to go on? I would like one of the focuses to be in that area. And years ago, I was given the privilege of getting a grant for Glen Park, and I put in a 20-foot spruce tree. And it's native to New England. You never see a spruce tree in a park. And with this amount of acreage, it creates a lot of possibilities. So I guess a long story short, and I noticed riding around there, there's not a lot of fall color either. You know, like you go down Gilman Street and there's all these, I believe, scarlet maples. So just bringing in more nature, the environment, and who knows, maybe you'll see a lot of people walking around with binoculars. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sure. So just to make sure everyone could hear okay, so to recap, so the suggestion was basically to do plantings for nature. So plantings that bring wildlife to the park and plantings that will make the park more beautiful with the season changes and stuff like that. So great suggestion. Thank you.
I'd like to see more dense evergreens along the highways to block the air pollution from the cars. And I think it'll keep the park cooler.
So the recap was to promote planting evergreen trees, especially along the corridors adjacent to I-93. And I think that's something that is a super exciting idea, and just want to highlight that Cross Street East Park, which is a couple blocks over, we're going to be implementing a vegetated berm that will collect some of the air particulates from crossing into the park. The evergreen berm will trap those air particles, and that's something that we're really interested in seeing how that performs, and perhaps we can start to think about using that in other places across the city. Oh, and Representative Mike Connolly just joined us recently, so thank you very much for attending.
I'm just really concerned. I live at near the corner of Jake's and Wheatland, where there's been a ton of flooding at that intersection when there are major rainstorms, and it really makes me nervous seeing that any improvements that happen don't introduce more impermeable surfaces, and ideally could actually do the opposite, where Foss Park can actually continue to alleviate some of the drainage problems. I don't know what kind of landscaping architecture is needed for that, but I just really get nervous seeing artificial fields come in that I would assume would be less permeable than a regular field, even though they'd be surrounded by permeable surfaces. Those kinds of things make me a little bit leery.
So the comment was about flooding, and as Louisa mentioned, this was a water body at one point, a canal. Typically, when we see former water bodies that have been filled for other purposes, it never sort of alleviates that's the low-lying part, and water naturally goes to the lowest areas. Some of the engineering departments and the engineering department in the city, they've been, as part of the municipal vulnerability preparedness program, have been implementing water metering and producing flooding water models in relation to sea level rise and storm intensity from 2030 to 2070. This data, we have lots of information specifically about areas like Jake Street, and would love to be able to advocate for stormwater management that works in tandem with the athletic fields. This is something that Lincoln Park, our newest park, there are stormwater chambers underneath the playing fields that capture and infiltrate stormwater. So I think, there's a lot of opportunities when we talk about, any renovation that we should be advocating for some of our future climate scenarios in our open spaces. Any other questions? I know everyone's probably very eager to talk about all of our other 3 topics. So perhaps without any, okay, last call. We're going to hand this over to Playgrounds, and Arne Franzen from Public Space Urban Forestry is would love to hear your comments and feedback about the playgrounds.
Thank you, Courtney. All right. As Courtney said, my name is Arne Franzen. I'm with Public Spaces and Urban Forestry. Thank you for coming to this meeting. I'd like to hear your comments about the playground and the pool area, but obviously this is just one component of a very large park. So if you think of other things that somehow tie into that in terms of the spatially or access or anything like that, feel free to jump in as well. Is everybody here familiar with the playground and the pool, its location? When I've been over to Foss Park, I've just in the summer, I see that pool and it's always busy. I think it's just like I think it's one of the best resources in the city. It's an incredibly busy space, and I love to see that. We always talk about the activation of our parks and how we can make them more active, and it's really encouraging to see the use that that pool gets. I don't want to talk too much. If you know the space, then I imagine you may have your own thoughts and concerns. I think that I have my own ideas about how we could improve that. I look at the location and the way the playground area is cut up and the size of that space, and there's lots of questions that I have about the play value of that space and how it could be improved. But I'd like to hear other people's thoughts. I think that a playground can be anything. The book is completely open in terms of our ability to shape that or what the potential is for this space. So would anybody like to start? Ellen.
I have a dream, and the dream would be that the pool could be a year-round facility where it could be covered in the wintertime so people could use it all year long, which would be really, I think, incredible. The second thing I would say is that I think it's really important to move the tot lot away from the highways because it is the worst possible place for it. It should be as far away from the highways, and it might be a little inconvenient for people, but I think people would prefer to have their children playing in areas that are not exposed to traffic pollution.
That's many people have voiced that concern before, but thank you for saying so. Eric.
Can you just repeat that because we have a chainsaw going on?
Okay. Yeah, I think we have a faulty light fixture, so I'm sorry for the hum. So one of the comment was, given the use of the pool and the popularity of it, wouldn't it be great if there was a cover over the pool so it could be used year-round? And the second point was, given the location of the playground and the pool so close to the roads, couldn't it be moved to a better location so it's farther away from the roadways in that busy corner? Let's go over here.
Hi, we can walk to the park, and we use the park and the pool and the splash deck. I will say that the splash deck is an improvement over the old kiddie pool, so I say 2 thumbs up to that. I do think, though, that it's cut off from the rest of the pool, and I'm sure that's intentional so that you don't have people running back and forth, but it does make it difficult. If maybe a younger child wants to go to the splash deck, but another child wants to be in the pool, it can make it difficult to have to go out and around. So if there's some way to have a better gating system between them. Also, I think if you look at the other parks that are now updated throughout the city, the Foss Park is very outdated. You just look at it and it really doesn't have the types of equipment that other facilities have, and I think that's really a drawback, including the location next to the, yeah.
Thank you very much. Did everybody hear the comments? They were talking about the pool area. I think that people have said, you know, they took out the old wading pool that was there and they put in the water spray area, and it's been very popular. You go there in the summer, kids are using it all the time. It's fenced off from the rest of the pool area. So the question was, couldn't the circulation be improved so there's a more natural flow between the two? So if I have it right, if you were a parent and using the space, you'd want to be able to have your kids move from one to the other and be able to have just better circulation. And then, I'm sorry, what was the last point was?
Just the facilities at the park. I mean, the facilities at the pool are also
You were saying, that's right, thank you. Just so that, right, and I agree. She was saying that the park facilities are just dated. They are old. There's still some value there, but certainly if you compare it to other parks in the Boston area, other parks in Somerville, they are old, and I would say that their play value is diminished. Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Okay.
I get the microphone doesn't provide an amplification, but it ties into our video.
Well, good evening. I'm Stephen Cronin. You might not recognize me because I'm not in my summer attire, and I don't recognize most of you because you're not in your bathing suits. But the past 4 summers, I've had the privilege of being the seasonal pool manager at Ladder Brothers Memorial Swimming Pool. So I've gained a lot of intimate knowledge. And to interject a little humor, certainly my lifeguards always thought this was funny. I was a lifeguard at Ladder in 1971. So, but to move forward into the 21st century, I call this a meeting with no vision, no commitment. We don't need to renovate Ladder. We need to bring it into the 21st century. We need to make it a year-round, 21st century aquatic facility. Now, what I've learned in my 4 summers at Ladder is that the abutters, the people adjacent to the park, take great ownership and great pride in the park. They were a great source to me, keeping me on the straight and narrow, giving me a heads up when there are other issues regarding the safety, the access to the facility, not only for my employees, but for patrons who come from all over, okay? And I can tell you firsthand, I have people, I won't even name the communities they call from to ask on a 90-degree day if we're open. But anyways, it can be what we want it to be if we gain vision and make the commitment. But we should be broadening our 50-meter pool to an 8-lane 50-meter pool, and then running across one end, having a pool that's 25 meters with 6 lanes. Okay? I don't think it's rocket science to do this. The engineering isn't tremendous. In relation to, I want to address the issue in regards to the splash deck. I was told, well, I boldly told the DCR engineer when they put in the splash deck, which was a great resource and really cleared out a lot of the traffic in the shallow end of the pool and made life a lot easier for parents, that the gate between the main pool and the splash deck would never be open while I was the pool manager, would never be unlocked, and if she wanted to fire me then she could. And she informed me that that is the I don't want to say it's policy, but that is what's done at every DCR facility. That if there's a splash deck adjacent to the main pool, that gate is locked. The scourge of the DCR is unattended children. And I could give you 1,000 stories of that, going back to, I had to deal with the wading pool. Nobody was happier than me when they eliminated the wading pool. But I just wanted to fill you in on that, okay? I understand what you're saying from a parental point of view, 100%, okay? But the other thing about the aquatic facility is to make it more user-friendly in terms of, we only have lessons prior to public opening. We need to have times during the day, AM, noon, PM, so we can have lessons during the day. And there's real 2 compelling reasons we should go forward with some vision and some commitment. I give you the obesity epidemic and the opioid crisis. It's quite incredible to me that the first thing that happens when people enter those programs to deal with those 2 addictions, they get into a substantial program of physical regimen. We have a facility that could address that. We could drown-proof every man, woman, and child, including the homeless that populate the park, in 1 year, if we had a regional pool facility. But thank you all for coming. I want to thank the neighbors. I think of you often during the winter, and I look forward to seeing you next summer.
We have a 15-year-old who grew up at Foss Park, and I do agree about the swim lessons. That would be a terrific idea. In the event that the state doesn't go for a year-round facility, I think that at the very least, maybe putting some shade or some sort of awnings or something in that area would be great. And the equipment at the playgrounds is really very outdated, and those wood chips, I think, have to go too.
Anybody else? Yes.
I don't mean to over-occupy. I don't mean to take up more time. I know the red light has gone on. I just wanted, you mentioned shade. One thing I learned at LADA and Four Summits from listening to my patrons, and I do listen to them, they wanted more shade, okay? None of us are going to the beach anymore, or the pool, and laying out for 12 hours. And I begged them for four summers to provide more shade. The one awning that we had that was in the splash deck area got broken a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. I was told it would be replaced July 1st when we would get the the money for fiscal 20 would come in. Well, the legislature didn't approve the budget until the end of July. If you want people to find at fault, they're the ones to find at fault. That's why you didn't have that one shade awning, which I don't think is adequate, obviously. They've talked about putting a structure between the end of the pool and the splash deck. But keep yelling about it because they don't listen to me. Thank you.
I think those are good points. I think that, if you have ideas about the playground or the pool or other features, it's important that we communicate those ideas and talk to the DCR and talk to, to our government representatives. So I think that's always key. So keep that in mind. Yes.
Probably should, because I'm a reporter, but I also do live here in Somerville, and I will probably attend Foss Park. And I think growing up, I'm from Los Angeles, and we have recreational parks everywhere. And something that was really cool, what he mentioned about having awnings and having that shade space. We at some parks and pool areas, we had kind of like columns, and people had like their own personal spaces where they had like a little personal bed, and they had like an umbrella. And if you have like maybe like a couple of those like around, that would be really nice. And you can have like a limited time, maybe like an hour, and then have like a list, and people can like write their names down, and then a family leaves, and then another family goes. And then maybe something like, to make it more vibrant, maybe even have like some barbecue spaces, if you could, with like benches, if people want to come during the summer and really spend time there with their family, that would be really cool too. And also, I know growing up, we had this one large slide, and everyone always loves a large slide. Kids will line up for hours, yes, at the pool. Just get them one large slide, and they will like stay there forever. So, yeah, that's what I have to say.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else? Anybody? Going once? Are we handing off? We're going to hand off to Mobility and Safety, and Brad Rawson will be taking over.
Thank you, an eye on the door. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident, and I serve the city as Director of Mobility. The team that I'm responsible for is working on everything from pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, bus coordination, and we're also the city's point people on the Green Line extension. So one of the things that we've heard through community processes, and we appreciate the work of Senator Jale and Rep. Connolly, Councillor McLaughlin, his councillors at large, Bill and Mary Jo. We've had some series of meetings on this site, and we know that the site itself works better when people from a variety of walks of life can get to the park safely, efficiently, and predictably, whether you're arriving on foot, whether you're driving, whether you're riding the bus, whether you're making a transfer from the Orange Line. So we wanted to make sure that we carved out some space in this agenda to listen to you all and talk about some of the issues. How do you all access Foss Park? I live in the far western side of the city, and I get here, again, on bus, on bike, driving, and walking sometimes from City Hall or from other meetings. But does anybody have any, elements that they want to kind of throw out there to start the conversation? Please, Bev. Right.
So I live at Assembly Row, and to get to Foss Park when I walk from Assembly Row is quite the maze of crossings, and it would be much simpler if there was at least a cut in the fence so I could enter Foss Park across from Blakely. Yeah, on that side, because getting over to West Fells Way, you either have to go all the way around the park or you have to do this quite a dance of like 6 crossings to get there because of the underpasses and all of that. And just one little cut in that fence would make life a lot easier.
Everybody hear Bev? That desire line to get from the park and the Winter Hill neighborhood over to the grocery store into East Somerville. Yeah, that is something that we hear. And it's funny that you choose the word cut through, Bev. We know that neighbors sometimes are actually cutting the DCR's fence, that there is such a desire to connect those neighborhoods that even though the park has its security fence on the edge and the DCR teams repair that fence, every 6 months or so, somebody cuts it with wire cutters because people want to take that shortest path to get over to those useful trips like the grocery store. So we have some projects in the pipeline that I'll talk about in a moment. Anybody else? Please, Kate.
I cross several times a week down Broadway to cross over by the fire station. That crosswalk, which I've reported to 311 numerous times, has got to be one of the most treacherous crosswalks to go across on Broadway. The lighting, timing signal, the lights, cars stop probably on the opposite side of the fire station where it goes off. You lose 5 to 7 seconds. If you try to go on the walk signal, cars are still coming through. I almost get hit every single time. You can't get fully across Broadway both ways, and the recent changes to Broadway have only made it worse. And so you've got to do something on that. Additionally, if you want people going there, you can't have only 3 crosswalks going down Broadway from the top of Winter Hill down. There needs to be more crosswalks.
Thanks. I think the acoustics are getting better. Folks heard Walnut, the kind of crossing from the southwestern corner of the park to the fire station, and making sure that that is a safe and inviting, reliable connection, that the curb ramps, that the crosswalks, that the signal itself really invite people to connect into the park through that entrance. Got it, thank you. All right, so those are kind of 2 major entrance points. Anybody else want to talk about another access question?
I would like to talk about putting a berm or some kind of protective barrier on the McGrath side of the park because first for air pollution, but also it's very noisy there, and it would reduce the noise there for people from the traffic. So.
Yeah, good one, Ellen. So the point was about, I think, some of the psychological, some of the acoustic, and of course the kind of the cardiovascular and pulmonary health of being so close to these big highways. So Ellen was talking about landscape treatments, raised berms, maybe even plantings to try to screen and shield elements of the park. You were talking about the McGrath edge, again, by Blakely, like Bev was talking about, Ellen. But we've also heard folks in the community talk about that northern edge on Mystic Avenue as looking for similar opportunities. Thanks. Please.
I'll build on that with the same side of the park. The sidewalk there is user hostile, I would say. I'm not worried about the cars. I'm just worried about tripping or stepping in mud. It's not well maintained.
Is that the sidewalk along the McGrath edge, that little asphalt path that's kind of outside of the fence line? Yes, it is treacherous. No matter how you're getting around, no matter what your ability, it's easy to take a trip there. Thank you. Anybody else? So we've talked about access from a couple different directions. What about once you're in the park? There are a series of pathways. Some of them are probably useful and pleasant, maybe others not so much. Lighting is something that we heard about in our previous meeting. Anybody have any comments or observations about lighting or the usefulness of the paths? Jerry, please.
Well, just it's short and sweet. You know, what you just suggested. We know that proper lighting and landscaping reduces crime, and also it enhances whatever environmental features you put in that property. So I think that's very important, that you make it more attractive as well as practical. Thank you.
Yeah, good points. Thanks. Please.
So my husband and I are in Foss Park every single day with our dog. So we are intimately familiar with everything that's going on down there. First of all, I'm not too sure that the DCR has been fixing the holes in the fences, because we've had the same holes in the fences for quite a while. The other thing is the lighting is unbelievably bad, especially at this time of year. There are a number of homeless people living in the park behind the pool area where they're covered, which is fine, but it can maybe upset some other people. There's a tent now in Foss Park with young people living in the tent, and it's just it feels like it just feels neglected. That's it, just neglected.
No, thank you. And again, part of the value of community meetings and dialogue like this is that lived experience for everybody who uses the facility different times a day, different times a year, and engaged in different activities is very valuable, feedback for the team. Anybody else? So I do want to take a moment and talk about some of the things that the city is working on in partnership with various state agencies. If I had a dime for every time we all collectively got frustrated talking about the MBTA, talking about Mass DOT, talking about the DCR or any other state agencies, again, Somerville has the benefit and the burden of these big regional facilities, and we know that our local teams can often have a better finger on the pulse of local needs than the state agencies do. On the good news front, the Mass DOT folks have been working on a series of safety improvements. We did a big community meeting in the auditorium about 8 weeks ago, on issues related to Mystic Avenue specifically, McGrath Highway, kind of a secondary fashion. We all know about the terrible fatal crash at the Kensington Crossing where one of our neighbors was killed back in the late summertime. And we know that the burden of these big arterials that carry 40, 50, 60,000 cars a day really do create an unsafe condition for our community. We have advocated with DOT to try to make these state roads work better for local needs. And so to their credit, they have mobilized a series of resources, and they're in a design process right now to try to improve some of those pedestrian connections. And the Blakely Ave connection is actually one of the specific ones we've been working on. So we raised those issues up to DOT. They assign their engineers. They use federal funding a year or two from now to start building out those pedestrian safety and accessibility improvements. And we're working on the same things over at Wheatland Street, at Grant Street, and a couple of other locations to try to make sure that folks from 10 Hills have the same legitimate, safe access points to use the great pool and the great splash pad and the great playing field. Well, what we hope in the future will be great playing fields. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'm happy to take a couple of minutes. but I'll also make a little bit of a commercial. We'll be doing community meetings in December and January with DOT to try to make sure that people can do those deeper dives and really kind of get their hands into the process and make sure that, again, when you notice a street light that's out, when you know the curb ramp that's broken, you notice a crosswalk that needs to be refreshed or a signal that needs to be retimed, that local knowledge is featured into the state's engineering process. And a year or two from now, they're going to spend about $5 million to fix up and really try to improve safety in and around the park. So I just wanted to give that little commercial. Anybody else have any questions or comments on excess? And obviously I'll stick around and be happy to talk with anybody. Thanks.
So the last group, I will be talking, and I'd like to invite Jill Lathan, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation, about athletic fields and courts. And I'd ask you to let us know how you use the athletic fields and courts, also what kind of improvements you would like to see, and general observations that you have about athletic fields and courts, please.
I've lived in the city for 22 years. I do play tennis. I believe there are 4 workable, or we can call them workable, but not really tennis courts in the entire city, 2 at Dilboy Field and 2 here. And in the entire 22 years, I don't think the nets have been replaced at these courts. I personally have used rope to try to hold them up. They've been completely neglected. And tennis is a great sport for people, and it's actually not a totally expensive sport either. You can go get a racket for $10 at Target. And so to get kids in our community out playing and trying other sports, we should be trying to revitalize these along with the basketball courts, which have been totally neglected. And I'd like to see on the other athletic fields, I know that we are putting in synthetic turf on for one field, but from an environmental perspective and from a flooding perspective and a neighborhood perspective, I think we should be trying to save our environment by putting in natural grasses rather than artificial turfs. And so I really hope that while we have one artificial turf surface going in, when we look at the rest of the park, we look at trying to save the rest of the park. Lastly, I don't know where it fits into this, I'm just going to say, and I know someone else said they had a dog, there are very few places in the city that dogs can actually go and walk on green grass, legally, on leash, actually have a place where they can walk on grass. The 3 dogs parks in the city are all dirt. And we have 5,000 registered dogs, probably 8,000 that are really living in the city. And I would really, my one fear with these changes is that they are going to take Foss Park away from being a dog-friendly place where you can take your dog. And that would be, I think, a huge travesty to the city, because right now, there's just very few places to actually take your dog, to have them to be able to put their paws onto green grass.
Did everyone hear that, or would you like me to recap? There were comments around the tennis courts being used, and we don't have many in the city, and also the basketball courts are neglected. Comments about the athletic fields and whether that they're turf, but she'd like to not see the other ones turf, and also that there are not many places where people can walk a dog on natural grass.
So I want to speak to the turf versus grass. I'm really grateful that we're committed to turf, because the purpose of turf is capacity, that you can run turf all day long, all year round. Honestly, I cringe every time I hear grass. I would rather the field say dust bowls than become grass, because once we have new grass, then we'll have to go by the protocols for maintaining grass, which limits the use of the grass to 500 hours a year. We can't afford another grass field. I'd rather be playing in dirt. Thinking regionally, the grass versus turf thing pops up at every single one of these meetings for every field. And what I'd really ask of the environmentalists who really care about this, that think of it regionally. Right now, I've gotten an email about Draw 7, that they're looking to make it a natural park, which I think is perfect for that area. And if we all end up with compromises where Draw 7 becomes a grass field, Foss becomes a grass field, nobody gets what they want. Let's have a beautiful natural park at Draw 7. Let's have some nice natural areas here, and let the sports teams have some turf. Thank you.
Did everyone hear her comments? So it was about the fact that we need to make compromises and that the turf fields are important for the athletic community because we cannot maintain the level and intensity of use on natural grass. Is that anyone else?
I think that everyone realizes that all of this facility, the whole park, is really kind of neglected, right? And I think we'd like as many people as possible to be able to use this space because we have such little green space and outdoor space in the city. And so I'd really like to see, if possible, you know, in these areas with courts, if we can have other structures. You know, we have people from parkour here. You know, Lincoln Park has other areas that that lend themselves to being used in different ways. And I think that thinking about that, you know, as we move forward would be really useful, that it can be cross-utilized by multiple different groups of people, young and old.
So the comment was about other types of recreational equipment that are not just the courts and playing fields, but that can be utilized by young and old folks. Anyone else?
I don't know. We're still playing. I think we're still playing Little League. I think I have this right. When he had to put the school in Glen Park, Capuano School, there was a trade-off with the land, and we put a small park down at Walnut Street. I think I have that right. What we sacrificed, I think that's the right choice of words, was a Little League field. So I don't know if it's possible. I don't know still all these activities. The kids are playing a lot of soccer, what have you. But if it's possible, and there's a need for it, I could see a Little League field replacing the one we lost at Glen Park. And the only other suggestion, dust. I don't want to be funny with the dust, but dust, windows, pools. We're surrounded by highway and cars. I think we can use as much air and as cosmetics and healthy air as we can possibly breathe. And I don't know if anybody put any meters down at Foss Park, but I'm sure it wouldn't come up too well. So dust, I'm up across from a dust bowl right now at GLX, so you know, why clean your car? But no, I maybe not the best choice, but it's better than a dust bowl, I think, respectfully.
I think, Jerry, you were saying that we need a Little League field.
Yeah, we lost one.
But we have a Little League field at Foss. At Foss, yeah.
Then I can expand on that by saying the needs met. I know a lot of concerns in the city is, because we have a lot of people in this square mile. Is there a need for, if there's a need for another Little League field, I don't think it would hurt anything. Because again, we did lose one at Glen Park, and if there's not, then it's a viewpoint.
So we have done actually a fair amount of analysis on the field situation in Somerville, and for those of you that are interested, on the website there's a fields master plan which looks both at diamond use and rectangular fields use, and that's really what's informed much of the policy and the decisions that have been made. And we do have an unmet need for field space in Somerville, but it is mainly on larger rectangular spaces.
And what is that? What sport is that?
Soccer, football, lacrosse, any.
Is that what I'm hearing?
We need more hours of play to serve our youth athletes. That is what you are hearing.
So, what I'm hearing, when my granddaughters were here, and it was tough to get any fields in Somerville, and they actually had to go to Medford or whatever. But whatever the right choice of words are to meet the needs, again, if it fits, we'll put it on. But again, I'm being redundant. We did lose that field at Glen Park, so whatever's possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this past year we've had over 1,000 young men and women here sign up for Somerville Youth Soccer here, which was the largest number on record here. As we look at the field situation here across the entire city, we look at Dilboy Field. The turf is in terrible repair. Conway here, we all know what's gone on there as well here, and it's going to be years probably until that field is open here. The situation at Foss here, the dust bowl that exists right now, I feel bad for the guys here that play soccer on that field here, right? And you know, we've got a growing population inside of the city here, and we look at another field like Argenziano and Lincoln Park there. They did a fantastic job with the park, but the drainage around the field here has made that the field space itself is nearly unplayable here for the kids, right? So one of the things that I'd like for us to consider here is, again, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's soccer, those fields will get used and do get used. So thank you.
So for those, I can't tell if you guys can hear or not because of the humming of the lights, but the comment was about how many youth are signed up for youth soccer and that we simply can't meet the need of those playing hours. And that was definitely instrumental in DCR deciding that this would be a synthetic turf field. I also want to welcome Councillor Stephanie Hirsch, who has joined us. You have a lot of elected officials here today, so thank you for coming out and listening to what folks have to say.
I just want to add on one thing. We talk a lot about the kids, and I think that that's great. Like, I have my daughters here. We want them to be able to use fields, but I think also if we have access, there's an adult soccer league that plays in the dust at Foss, and I think that there are, BCCS, which caters to adults playing sports more informally. I think we also have to have this available for older adults who can utilize this space as well.
So the comment was about forgetting that old people need to exercise too, and creating spaces for adults to use the fields as well.
Good evening, everybody. Stanley Vieira. I work for the high school athletic department. And to be honest with you, it's amazing because I look at all the needs that are going on in the city. I think that the person that has the hardest job here is Jill Lathan, because she has to manage somehow figuring out programming for all of our youth sports, our high school sports. It's not an easy job. I think the simple answer, from my perspective, is a healthy balance of turf and natural grass, and trying to figure that out the best way we can. My comments, really the questions I have, and I'm late to the ball game because I'm new to Somerville High School. I just came on this year, but it's specifically regarding the Foss turf complex. Just some questions that I'm just curious about from our standpoint, from a programming standpoint. Is there going to be security on the field? Will that field be locked up, closed? Are there going to be locker rooms available for teams to use? Will there be storage on the field? Is there an actual water source there for teams to utilize? Will there be seating for spectators? And then will there be appropriate lines on that field for whatever sports we're doing, whether it's soccer, football, lacrosse, whatever it is? I think sometimes, through no fault of anybody, sometimes we get these complexes in place and we fail to recognize some of the little things that are really important to make sure our teams are taken care of. So. And obviously restrooms. When I say locker rooms, I should have included also restrooms as well. Not just for our teams, but for our public as well.
So the comments were about the amenities, additional amenities to accommodate sports teams like water fountains, spectator seating, proper lines, restrooms, etc. Anyone else?
Thank you. I appreciate your time and everyone that came out tonight. My name is Roger DeRocha, and I'm president with Somerville Pop Warner, which is youth football and cheerleading. As a lot of you know, every year you'll see us down at Foss Park from August to November. It is the only rectangular park really big enough for my program to be at, because there's no other space in the city for us to be. I hear all your concerns, like yourself, sir. Little League diamonds, you got a minor league diamond, a major league diamond, and there's a Babe Ruth diamond there that adults use, kids, high school. The soccer field that is there is mostly a dust bowl, and if you want to come down during my season, you can help me flush out the 300 kids' eyes that have dust and dirt in their eyes every night from trying to play a sport on it. The difference between turf and grass, Mrs. Lathan can testify to, with all the rain that we get, the parks are flooded, constantly closing all the parks in the city. Sorry you can't use them because the fields are flooded, they're mud. My program, you know, we practice 4 to 5 nights a week. I've had most weeks that my kids can only practice 1 night because the park is flooded and full of mud. I've been going to Cambridge over to Russell Field. They've been nice enough to let me use their field because it's turf to bring my kids to practice so that they could get ready for games. Restrooms, you know, luckily that Recreation has put porta potties down there for us, but unfortunately you have all the homeless people that live in them. So it's tough to use with the kids. The lighting is tough, but you know, political folks always get the lights put on for us, and it's not enough at all to light up 2 fields for my kids to play. So again, Recreation supplies some portable lights for us to use, which isn't, you know, it does the job somewhat, but it's not enough because most nights you'll see we have to pull some cars in there to turn headlights on so that the kids can see what they're doing. I've been on the Hill. I've lived in Winter Hill for almost 60 years. I've seen that park as a kid, as a young man, as an adult. Been through it every day of my life. I've seen that park restored several times. Every time it's redone with grass within 2 to 3 months because of the wear and tear with ours, it's destroyed again. DCR just cannot keep up with it, with the use that it gets. Bev was talking about the use of fields, how turf outweighs grass because of the hours. Unfortunately, I'm probably the only program that uses Foss because most programs won't go down there, or they don't have the use time to be there. But with a good field put in there, it would benefit the kids of this city 100%, 1,000%. We're building this huge, great city here in Somerville that are bringing families from all around in here, and what field do we have to be proud of? We have Dilboy Stadium that we go and play our home games, but where do my kids go to practice? Where do they play at? I hear everybody's concerns, and I've been fighting for a long time. But these kids deserve a field that they can play on, that they can be proud of. And once all our kids, soccer, Little League, football, anything, tennis, and once you build this park to where people are proud, you're going to bring more and more kids that our youth programs are going to start to build up again. There was a time where Somerville, we were the best. We had the largest programs around with kids and sports. And I know I'm only speaking sports, but it's gone. It's disappearing. Kids just aren't getting out of the house. And I refuse to believe it's because of Fortnite or iPads, social media. It's just they don't have the means. If we start building now, if we can get these kids back out there, our youth programs can start to build the high school, build our programs back up at the high school. We're building this huge high school, and what teams are we going to have there if we don't have the proper kids being trained to get there? So, I mean, I could stand here all night and talk, and I don't want to waste anybody's time, and I'd be willing to answer any questions you want to know because I've been in and outside that park. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. My feelings, there's a lot of green down at that park. If you put one turf rectangular field, what do we have, Jill? Only one rectangular field in the city, Dilboy? No other rectangular field that these kids can play on? High school can't go down there with football practice or soccer? I mean, one rectangular turf field that could constantly be used. If it rains out, the kids can still go on it and practice. It doesn't matter how many hours did we go this week because we can't go over 500. You know, it would be put to use, and then you have all that other green area down there that can be used. And it's just a shame to see that people are willing to finally do at this park, and kind of like everybody's nitpicking of why it should be and it shouldn't be. Let's get this park done so that the kids can have something, and we can be proud of this in the city. Please, thank you. I appreciate your time.
I can't even recap that. You did such a great job. That's okay. That's okay. Anybody else? Yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I hear all that, but it's great to have a meeting like this that's inclusive, and we can all get great ideas, and that's how we learn from each other. The other part of it is I also grew up in the city my whole life. I'm very familiar with Foss Park. So speaking of your points, are we looking at drainage where there are possibilities? There's many ways we can say this, and we'd all be right. I like to go to the answer first and work backwards. So all the things we brought up, which are great amenities to the city, the sports, whatever, the landscaping, safety issues. What I'm trying to say is, have we looked at drainage before? It was a pond. And I even think it's affected by the moon growing up in the city. It seemed the water seemed to be more dependent on a full moon. So a long story short, if we're not looking at the drainage, maybe we should. Thank you.
Did you get that one?
I think mine is just a question. I remember when the announcement came out last year that the state was setting aside 1.2 million. Didn't it come out of your office? Is that still the case for the field? Oh, just for the field? Is there more money available? No. So we're talking about 1.2 million for the field. So the reality of any of these other things being done is slim, unless the city. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. 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 So the other rumor with the dog owners down the park in the morning is that DCR will have will own the land for the next couple of years, and then the city is taking it over.
Well, there is no plan to sell the land to the city.
Okay.
But no one has offered that. But the city has offered
To.
that they would run it.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, there's no agreement about billboard, which continues to be operated without a standard MOU.
Mm-hmm.
So when that's settled, perhaps the city can start to work on an agreement with the DCR. That would be
Good information to take back to the dog owners. Thank you.
I would say not soon. DCR just got a new commissioner. They go through their commissioners. And they don't have a lot of money.
Thank you.
But any kind of agreement would have to be negotiated, and I have not heard. If there's progress, we're unaware of it.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Sure, yeah. Hey everyone, thank you for being here. I'm Mike Conley, State Rep for East Somerville and East Cambridge. And just to address a couple of the quick points, the proposal that DCR is imminently prepared to move forward with is a new turf field and its drainage for that turf field, and it's a new series of lighting to accompany that field. And certainly, as Senator Jalen indicated, you know, our state, I talk about it being in a state of austerity, and I could talk for several hours about our state budget. But leaving that aside, it will be an iterative process. So certainly, we have this $1.2 million effort in front of us, and then I think it's meetings like this that will help us understand how we can advocate, and then also certainly work with our city partners to try to understand, you know, what the broader future might hold. The one other quick point I wanted to add, hopefully everyone heard, and I think I'm proud to see sort of how this worked out with DCR. DCR recently announced that they're going to do a natural living shoreline at Draw 7, and they've scrapped the plan to do the artificial turf at Draw 7. And as much as I really want to, see us accommodate the need for youth sports, I felt like that struck a really nice balance between not wanting to go all the way in the direction of artificial turf, but also wanting to accommodate folks at Foss Park. So before Commissioner Roy left, I think that was one of the things Senator Jalen and I and our delegation sort of communicated with them. You all may have seen that photograph of Draw 7 completely inundated with water last winter during a storm, so I think that may have got them thinking about wanting to go with the living shoreline approach. But certainly don't want to take up too much time, but I'm always available if folks want to talk about this stuff more.
Yeah, Matt McLaughlin, Ward 1 City Council, so Foss Park is technically in Ward 1. I'm glad you asked that question because I came late and I wasn't sure if this issue was addressed, and I feel like the elephant in the room are two big issues here. Who's paying for this and who's owning the property after it's paid for? So DCR has committed to the turf field, but that is all they've committed to. So there's no additional money right now coming from DCR. That means everything we're talking about, I assume, is going to be us paying for it. And I'm more than happy to pay for it, but I also want some control over the park, because every problem that's been addressed today, whether it's shade at the pool or whether it's people putting up tents in the park, we get a number of calls for syringes, needles being left at the park. This obstacle of it being state property just always gets in the way. And the other issue we've had is, I brought this up at the last Foss Park meeting about a year ago, and we learned that in order for us to outright own the property, to own Foss Park, would be so expensive that it would defeat the whole purpose. And that's before even the actual maintenance and the improvements we want to make. I forget what the formula is, but it's a crazy formula for a land swap for the state that's just not going to happen. But we could have something like Dilboy, where the state technically owns the land, but the city maintains it and they have control over it. So I definitely feel like, I've said it before and I really want to reiterate this for the city, that if we're going to put millions of dollars into this property, we have to have some say in what goes on with it, because I'm more than happy. This is the biggest open space in the city. It's the space that we really need in order to meet everybody's needs. But if we're going to pay for all of this and then the state's going to control it, and 10 years later, we have to deal with maintenance of the turf field and we have to deal with maintenance of the grass and everything, and it's still the same bureaucracy, same problem. It's not going to solve much. So I just want to reiterate that, willing to pay for the money, but we need some control over it as well.
I just have a question. With all the development going on in the city, would it be possible to think about reaching out and using some of the funds that come into the city, that when deals are struck with the developers, to apply it to some of these great ideas people have for improving the park? I mean, we have partners here, Puma's coming, we're getting all these other developers, and I'm just wondering if that's not something that would be helpful to make improvements.
Citywide zoning plan is very outdated. And one piece of that we have been talking about is the potential of what you just spoke to, that if a development is happening and they don't have the capacity to do the percentage of green and open space that needs to be on their plot, they would instead pay a figure that we would figure out that would go into a fund that over time would build up, which would allow the city then to maintain and do what was needed to be done. But it's in discussion at the council level right now.
Mary Jo, may I complement that point? So that's one important side of the equation. And also, Ellen, to your good question, the city has worked to make sure that when large development has come through the pipeline over the last couple of years in places like Assembly, that there are these kind of financial mechanisms where you literally do a math exercise that says $2 per square foot that the development entity creates just gets put into a special account controlled by the city council with a real specific purpose. And the last couple ones that have come through in Assembly, the old movie theater, et cetera, we have said these need to be put into stabilization funds that would be utilized by the city council for specific improvements in partnership with the DCR. So Draw 7 and Foss were the ones that were specifically kind of baked in to these development agreements. So it's a nice example of how, as Mary Jo said, this kind of rational regulatory framework and zoning combined with great advocacy from our state delegation and then administration by the city and the finance team here helps us build up that piggy bank that under the right circumstances, as Matt rightly said, potentially can be used for the benefit of our community using private funds. Question was how much funding. So there was about a 2 million square foot development at the old movie theater, Kate, that was permitted a year and a half ago. And I'd have to check the specifics, but I think it's in that order of magnitude of like $2 a square foot for these off-site infrastructure improvements that could include drainage, that could include parklands, that could include traffic safety issues. So we'll be happy to dig into those documents and make sure that the city council and constituents have all of that information. But again, as Mayor Jo often says, we don't have that many tools at our disposal from a municipal finance standpoint. We have real estate taxes. We have our taxes that go to the state that are redistributed to us through state aid, and we have fees and fines like the proverbial parking tickets and stuff. So using the energy and the resources of the private sector is one of the ways that we've been able to do a lot of important public improvements in the city over the years, and it's one of those toolkits that we want to continue to refine and expand. So I hope that's helpful.
Are there any other comments on athletic fields? I'm looking at that youthful table over there. Have you guys got any comments about Foss Park in general? Everything has been covered. Yes.
My name's Blake. I work with a bunch of the parkour communities in the local area, and I think one of the underserved groups in this area especially is the youthful table over here. And not to put them in the spotlight, but I think there aren't that many places where young people can hang out in the city, where they can have a place that is their own. And I think Foss Park is ideal as a space for that. It's close to the high school. It's in a central part of the city, and it would be really cool to see some spaces that are kind of designed for non-traditional sports. I'm biased, I speak from the parkour perspective, but having spaces where we can have multiple generations intermingling, but also designed for our young people, because most of our parks and playgrounds are not designed for them, are not necessarily open to them, and they may not feel comfortable there, and it'd be great to have a space for them to go.
So just in this, are there any other comments about Foss Park or this meeting in general? To Blake's point about being inclusive and trying to accommodate youth, we also recognize that in our observations and of using Foss Park, it's a very diverse park, probably one of the few parks that you go to and still see quite a different array of age groups and people. And we really want to, in as much as we can, reach out to the other communities that are using Foss Park that potentially don't feel the agency that we may feel coming to a community meeting and expressing that. So we will be working through the language liaisons and trying to find a number of different ways in which people can contribute to this conversation, because I think it is very much a conversation worth having. To that, I want to ask everyone to please make sure that you signed in. We do not use your emails for anything at all. No Publishers Clearinghouse, nothing, except to tell you specifically about the Foss Park process. So please, if you can print legibly, that's also very helpful. I want to let you know that there's a lot of pizza in the back, so please eat some. There is a website called Summer Voice, and on the table there are some little tabs with the website. Councillor Hirsch has them in her hand. I don't know what's happening with, motion sensor. So we can continue. Okay, here we go. So on the website, there are some maps, and you can drop a pin on that map and make comments. Super helpful if you live there, so that we know what is kind of happening on the microclimate level. There's also a number of surveys that we have in all the 4 languages. Ellen just mentioned that there are some here. We would love to get your input on those. If you want to take some for your neighbors, that would be wonderful. We'll also get them online. This meeting will also be online at the website. I want to thank you for not only to the residents and users of the park, but to the elected officials. We really have a lot of people here, and which is a testament to how important this park is. So I thank you all for spending your evening with us. And as I said, the end goal of this is to come up with a report that tries to get all of this input into an informational report that the advocates and our elected officials can use, and that will hopefully guide our negotiations with the state and what we can do in this park. So thank you very much for coming.